Well, very excited because we have so many famous people come on this show, but very rarely do we have a real-life superhero. This man that joins us, Dr. Michael Rice, is exactly that. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Hey, great to have you here. Now, Dr. Rice, more than 50 years at the Women's and Children's Hospital looking after kids with cancer. It is phenomenal what you have done, and these units that we're getting made over are named after you. Tell us about the journey. It is fascinating, the work you have done.
Well, it all starts in 1960 when I first came to the Women's and Children's Hospital. It was then the Adelaide Children's Hospital. And I did my initial training and became interested in what we could do for children with cancer. At that stage, it wasn't very much. And indeed, all the children with leukemia died. But there was just a suggestion that something was happening, and I got interested, and I thought, I'm going to have a go at this. One of my mentors said to me, "What are you about to do when you leave here?" And I said, "I'm going to work in the cancer unit in Melbourne." And he said, "Why on earth would you want to do that?
Yeah.
There's no prospects." And I said, "No, it's awful at the moment, but I think something's happening and I want to be part of it." So I went to Melbourne for 2 years and worked with the pioneer in cancer treatment in children in Australia, a chap called John Colbatch.
Yep.
And then I went on to the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Centre in New York. After I'd spent 6 weeks in Boston at their cancer centre. And then I came back to Adelaide in 1967 and started up the unit at the then Adelaide Children's Hospital. And I remained there until the end of 2012 when I finally decided it was time to go.
That is phenomenal. Now, the Michael Rice Centre is named at the Women's and Children's Hospital after your wonderful work. When you mentioned there that your mentor said to you, "Why would you do that?" Was that because... Was that because there was a feel that these kids couldn't be treated, or why was that?
I think he'd recognised, as we all did at that time, that, for example, no child survived acute leukemia. And in my 50 years, that went from 0 to 80%.
Really?
And that's an extraordinary change.
That is phenomenal.
And he was echoing what was a fairly widely held view at that time. Don't put these kids through anything terrible. They're not going to survive. Just help them as best you can, and they'll die fairly soon.
So almost putting these young kids in palliative care?
Yeah. And palliative care didn't exist then.
Yeah.
And when I went to Melbourne, there was still a bit of that same view. I'd get corridor consultations saying, "We've got this child in the ward who's got a tumour. Is he one you ought to see?" Because there was still that view that, why should you put these children through what even then was a difficult treatment, and it's gone on to become increasingly intense. But the payoff's there. As I said, 0 to 80% survival in acute leukemia, 0 to 85% in a disorder called non-Hodgkin lymphoma, 10 to 60% for bone tumours. And so I went through an extraordinary era. My father, who was a general practitioner, always told me that it was his era before and after was the introduction of antibiotics. And I think that's probably a reasonable comment, that was an even bigger change than the one I experienced with childhood cancer. I gave a lecture in 1998 when I was awarded a medal that I entitled "From Darkness to Light," because that's what it was.
Yeah.
It was terrible darkness, and it went through to be so much better. And then along the way, we discovered that some of these children had unfortunately paid a price for their cure. And the first one we came to recognise was that children with leukemia who'd received radiation treatment to their head to prevent them developing brain leukemia, down the track were not doing well at school.
Mm-hmm.
And around the world, this was recognised. This was in the mid to late 1970s. And so we all started saying, well, what do we do to help these kids? And they were not your usual type of child with learning difficulties. They had some other problems as well. And parents came and asked us, what can be done? And we said we need to get something that's perhaps outside the hospital scene that we can, utilise to help these kids. And so a group of them got together And at Woodville Oval in 1981, late 1981, the Childhood Cancer Association was established.
1981.
1981, and it's thrived ever
Yes.
since. And it's moved from helping children with learning difficulties to all sorts of other things. As treatment intensified and results got better, country kids, for example, had to spend a long time in Adelaide. This was not treatment that you can administer at Port Augusta, for example.
Yep.
So it was in the mid-'80s that the Childhood Cancer Association decided their next major task would be to establish accommodation, provide accommodation for country children. And it was mid-'85 when the Michael Rice units were opened.
What a lovely thing to have them named after you. And these are the ones that we're making over,
Yes.
which is absolutely wonderful. I just want to ask you, obviously you're dealing with the parents and seeing these kids and over the years seeing things improve. How tough is it dealing with little kids? Because you are saying goodbye, obviously, to some of them.
Oh, you pay a price.
Yeah.
I gave a lecture, must be 7 or 8 years ago now, on how I survived. And the real answer was that the outcomes became better. I couldn't have survived if we hadn't seen progress.
Yeah.
But seeing progress helped you. It never made up for the kids who died, but at least helped you to keep going. And then to see them grow and do good things and get their own careers going, that was an enormous boost as well. And then we also started to realise that not only were there learning difficulties, but there were other prices that they paid.
Yep.
Some of them had difficulty with, deciding what their careers would be. And for a time, the Childhood Cancer Association provided vocational guidance assistance. And then, as the years went by, we established what we called a long-term follow-up clinic, and because that's been an issue that is still unresolved as to who should continue to look after these young people. I mean, my oldest survivor now is in her early 50s, and I spoke to her when I was doing a project just in the last 3 years before I stopped work.
Yeah.
I was trying to track all the old patients with whom we'd lost contact. And I rang this girl who was our first leukemia survivor. I knew she lived in Sydney.
Yep.
And I kept ringing and I got no answer. And I thought, I got the wrong number. I thought, I'll have one more try. I'll ring later at night. And I rang her at about 9 o'clock, and she answered the phone. And I said, who was? She said, oh, I never thought I'd hear from you again. Oh. And I said, I've been trying to ring you for 6 weeks. She said, oh, I was travelling in Europe having a holiday.
Fantastic.
So, those are the sort of little anecdotes that coming back to your original question, how did you keep going?
Yep.
You kept going because you had that sort of experience. Childhood Cancer's gone on to do many other things. They provided respite home down at on the Fleurieu Peninsula where people can go when things are tough. They've gone on to provide this. Probably heard of the family support program, which again was parent initiated, provided an extraordinarily valuable service, and has now moved on from the parents running it to having the association run it, and all the various other activities they've got into has been a marvellous assistance to the families. I know that they run grandparents programs, sibling programs. And that's because I think we've come to recognise that whilst treatment has produced better results, there's an awful journey you go through to get there. And it's not just the child, it's the parents. And in recent years, as times have gotten better and results have gotten better, if something goes wrong, that's a bigger setback than it ever used to be. When I started, you expected things would go wrong. Now the expectation is my child will be cured. And we did a project a few years back looking at a group of families whose children relapsed with their leukemia, and it became apparent that was an awful stage to go through. And again, the association helped us out with providing that additional support at a time of crisis.
And Michael, you, as you said, you've retired in 2012. You still keep yourself active within the medical community?
I still do some child advocacy work, not just in the cancer field, but I still go in about once a fortnight to pick up any messages that are around, and they still keep coming through. I get messages from old patients, what do I do about this, or what do I do about that? And it's always interesting to hear from them again.
I would imagine there are people listening right now that have been involved with you over the past 50 years, because it's probably just about all kids that have gone through cancer in that time. You would have played some role in their treatment.
Yes, because the children's, Adelaide Children's initially, Women's and Children's from mid-90s, was the only place. Flinders Hospital treated a small number of children for a short period of time, and then a decision was made that all children's cancer care should be centralised. So, yes, I have been involved in most of it.
You mentioned early on. You mentioned that people were a little pessimistic, perhaps, about the future with treating children. Obviously, that's changed so dramatically, which is wonderful. Is the future bright to even make further and further gains?
Yes, it is. The work on the Human Genome Project is starting to pay off in big ways. It's taught us a lot about how cells behave, good cells and bad cells, and in the last decade a whole new raft of treatments have come up. Now, we don't yet know how they quite fit in, and we don't yet know, as we had to learn on the way, what adverse effects they might have in the longer term. But the situation has improved substantially, not just in children, I might say, but also in the adult cancer world.
Well, Dr. Michael Rice, as I said at the start, you are an everyday hero that people don't get to often meet superheroes. It is our absolute honour to have you come and join us, and the work you've done, well, you're a lifesaver. There's no doubt about it. And I think on behalf of everyone that's been involved with the projects we've been involved with, thank you so much for your wonderful work.
Well, it's been a great pleasure to come in, and I can only say that gamble I took back in 1963 paid off in spades.
Well, it certainly did, and there are thousands and thousands of people alive to say thank you for being able to do that. So thank you, Dr. Michael Rice.
Thanks.